All right, in today's episode, we're going to talk about why MAPS training programs has been consistently ranked as the most effective training programs out there.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that better. I like
All
that
right.
better. It's much better.
All right. So
smart people.
I guess we're going to talk about, the kind of how it all started and what makes the MAPS programs what they are. Because we've got tens and thousands of people who've followed the programs. And there's a lot of, we talked about this early on, but we've been on air now almost 8 years. So we really haven't talked about kind of the deal.
Well, how is this for you right now? You and Doug, right? To think about this, that literally right about 10 years ago, you and him, you were training him, you were working on writing this up. He was testing probably some of the philosophy around it, and you were applying some of the things that you were coming up with to your clients at the time. Have you wrapped your brain around that? That's its 10-year anniversary right now?
Man, it's pretty cool. It went by fast, huh, Doug?
Too fast.
It went by super fast.
Does it feel like that long ago?
Like both. It feels like a long time ago. You know why it feels like when I see old videos and I go, yeah, it was a long time ago. But it also feels like it went by and it's like having a kid. Like your kid grows up and you're like, oh my God, where'd the time go? It went by so fast. But so back then I had a wellness studio. So we did personal training and I had massage therapists there, acupuncturists, people that help with nutrition, all that stuff. And that's when Doug came in and Doug hired me as his trainer. And now leading up to that point, I had been training people for probably 12 years or so. So I'd been doing it for over a decade. And I was always a student, like you guys, right? A student of fitness, right? Learning about how things did, people did things in the past and what works and what doesn't work. Anyhow, I started training Doug, and Doug had a lot of experience with exercise. So he was by no means a beginner. He had been working out for a long time. He'd follow bodybuilding routines, and he was a bit of a student of the game as well. Came to me because he was referred to me by his chiropractor. And through training Doug, he saw like this really rapid transformation. And how long into our relationship was it that you approached me?
I wish I could remember the exact amount of time, but I would say within the first year and a half.
Yeah.
So you guys have been training for a while.
For a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I basically, I took some time to see what was actually going to happen as far as the workouts were concerned.
Right.
And response.
I'm sure you were skeptical because of your experience of lifting over the last, previous 2 decades?
Yes. So I had experience working out. Of course, I'd had a lot of frustrations working out over the years, and the philosophy that Sal was putting forth was certainly counter to a lot of the things I'd read in the Bustle and Fitness magazines. But again, my experience was such that I had tried all kinds of different things and I hadn't seen the success I wanted. And I was very open to a different approach or different philosophy, because obviously if what you're doing is not working, something's got to change. And so I I stood back, just went through the workouts with Sal and saw the benefits. And little by little, I started thinking, well, this is something that we should be sharing with other people because it's been game-changing for me. Why shouldn't we get this out there? Because most of the information I'd been seeing had been really kind of counter to what Sal was putting out there.
How many weeks were you into the program before you kind of had that epiphany and were like, wow, this is different, but also it's super effective in comparison to what I've done before?
Well, even during the first month, I started seeing some real changes. So I started out and I gained a lot of strength. I started putting on size and I go, okay, something's working here.
So now you're committed.
I'm committed. And I'd paid for, I think, 10 sessions originally.
It was your first package, yeah.
And then he had another package, which was 40 sessions. So
nice bump sale. So
very nice, yeah. So I ponied up the money for that, which was it was not cheap.
No,
he was expensive.
Yeah.
But I figured, well, once I'm into it, I want to get the benefits, so I'm going to go all in. And so I did that. And then I think I purchased that package at least once or twice after that as well.
Yeah.
But sometime I think during that, towards the end of that first package, the 40s, package, I said, I really want to do something with this guy.
So be honest, all these years now we've been together, you pretty much control most of our money. Have you skimmed most of that money back that you gave to Sal?
Yeah, pretty much, little by little.
Here's that first 10 back.
I remember the first time I really had to convince. So Doug was like the perfect client. So you guys have known this. I'm sure you've experienced this. You have that one client that, at first are skeptical, but then you show them and then they're like, okay, cool. Let's just like, I'll go along and follow, what you say. And then it becomes a great relationship. They get great results.
Yeah.
So he was like the perfect client in that sense. And the first thing I had to convince Doug of was to only work out twice a week. That in fact, when he hired me when he was hiring me, he wanted to come 4 days a week. So him and I started talking. He already bought the training and he wanted to do like 3 or 4 days a week. And I said, no, we're going to do 2 days a week to start with. And I had to convince him of it. But, within a few weeks, he knew, okay, this is working.
That speaks to your integrity too, because Justin would have sold him on the 4 times a week. And just, walked with him on the other 2 days or something like that.
I truly found it hard to believe that twice a week was going to do the trick. Yeah. I really did. But I looked at Sal, I looked at myself, and I go, well, this guy might know something, But I trusted the process.
And he got great results from it. But towards probably that second or third package that you had done with me, Doug came to me and he says, Sal, he goes, I have some internet marketing experience. He wasn't an internet marketer. He sold insurance, but he says, I have some experience. If you ever want to put something together that we can sell online, he goes, I'll do that with you. And I had nothing at that point. I didn't really have an idea of what to sell. I'd always thought about writing a book, but I thought, what would that look like, digitally or whatever. And so I took what he said, and it just kind of stayed in the back of my mind. And I went home, and it was probably...
This is like 2012, 2011, 2013, around there. What time is this? Like
I'd say this was either at the end of 2012 or the beginning of 2013.
Okay.
Yeah. Now consider up until this point. At this point, I had already learned a lot about training and had figured out that a lot of the stuff that I thought was effective wasn't. And I'd do things like I had probably a few years before this, I really got into learning about how athletes trained before steroids even became a thing, how before supplements became a thing. And this was something that was of interest to me because I knew that anabolic steroids changed how the body responded to exercise. So I said, back in the day before that even existed, they had to train the way that my clients trained, the way that I was training naturally. And there has to be, if they trained differently then, it's because they were natural. So let me see what they did. And when I look back, there were so many different things that they did that people didn't do anymore. So up until this point, I had kind of figured some of that stuff out. But anyway, he came up to me and said, hey, if you have an idea, I'd love to work with you on it. We could sell it online. And it was probably a week later. And I went home that night, maybe a week later. I was up late reading. And I would do this sometimes. Sometimes I'd stay up late and I'd read whatever. You guys know I'll get into something and I'll just start, kind of going crazy on it. And I was reading the New England Journal of Medicine. And there was a study that I've quoted many times on the podcast it was a really interesting study. They took groups of men and they compared each group of men to each other on muscle building. And the groups were broken up into natural with strength training, anabolic steroids with weight training, anabolic steroids, no weight training, so just sedentary, and then just sedentary. Mm-hmm. So it was sedentary with steroids and training, and then training naturally. And the results of that blew me away because I did not expect
one
see
in particular, right? Because you knew that the steroids and working out was going to be the biggest.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Like I'm like, they're going to build the most muscle.
It's a unique study, by the way.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
The one that blew me away, because I would have thought second place would have been the natural lifting group. Mm-hmm. So the group that was natural lifting, they've got to build the second most amount of muscle, but it wasn't. It was the steroid group that didn't lift weights. Mm-hmm. Now, it was a short study. I think it was, I want to say 16 weeks. But in that 16-week period, the steroid group that didn't lift built a little bit more muscle than the natural group that lifted. And I thought, this is insane. The first thought I had was, wow, steroids are really powerful.
Yeah.
But then what came to me after that, and I was literally up till 3 a.m. thinking about this, and this is when I started writing out the first MAPS program, is I said, you know, what's crazy about this isn't the fact that the steroid group that didn't lift built the most muscle. It's that my previous ideas of how we built muscle is not complete.
Mm-hmm.
So the thought process then was, in order to build muscle, you damage the muscle with exercise, the body heals and then adapts. Okay?
Therefore, to that point, the thought process, I think for all of us at that point in our lives was like, okay, the more damage I do, the better off I'm going to be, because then I have a louder muscle building signal,
equate
right?
your healing to whatever damage you do.
Yeah, there was that, but there was also that I had completely ignored that there could be potentially any other muscle building signals.
Yeah.
It was damage and that was it. There's no other signals that send that the body receives that says build muscle. Well, in this study, clearly there was no damage. There was a hormonal signal, which was the steroids, right? They gave them testosterone. So I thought to myself, and this is why I was up till 2 or 3 a.m. that night, I thought, I wonder what other signals tell the body to build muscle that have nothing to do with damage.
Yeah.
Like, what other signaling systems tell the body to build muscle? So then I was on the internet going crazy and thinking of my experiences with clients and family members. One that popped up immediately was, and again, I've talked about this before, probably at least 100 times on the show, is I have a lot of blue collar workers in my family. I have plumbers and tile setters, construction workers, mail carriers, and none of them work out, but they all had muscular body parts that correlated or corresponded to the activity that they did. So like the mail carriers in my family all had these really muscular forearms, calves, male and female, all had really muscular calves. And the plumbers in my family, these muscular forearms, and I'm like, they're not, when you're a plumber or a mechanic or a mail carrier, you might cause a little muscle damage at first, but these people have been doing it for 20, 30 years. They're all in their 50s and 60s. That damage stops. It's not like they're walking more or cranking on things that are harder. After the first couple months, the body's adapted and that's it. Why the heck are these mail carriers' calves? I mean, literally their calves look like bodybuilder calves, or like I have an uncle whose forearms were like this. And he was a mechanic or plumber. And I thought, the damage stopped. What is telling these body parts to continue to grow? And I'm like, there's still some signaling going on, even though there's no damage. Even though there's no damage, there's some signaling going on. So that was like one clue that I had. Yes.
So
exactly.
you basically had your slip in the shower flex capacitor moment.
Yeah, dude.
And it was like signals.
Yeah. So I'm like
muscle signals.
So I'm thinking all this different stuff. So I'm like, okay, there's damage. That's a real one. Then there's this like low level frequent signaling system, which I ended up, figuring out it's kind of like mechanical signaling. Then there's the pump. The pump can actually induce muscle growth itself. So there's another one. So then I thought, I'm going to create a program that utilizes all these different signaling systems and puts them together in a way to where the body's constantly getting a signal to build muscle. Because the challenge with damage is always recovery. You can only damage so much. And then the limiting factor is, otherwise, if recovery wasn't an issue, I could just go work out for 6 hours in a row and beat the crap out of myself, and I'd get better results. And so that's how literally the first MAPS program was created. And I remember that the day after that, Doug comes in to train with me, and I'm all tired because I was up all night. And I'm like, I got something, dude. I said, I wrote up a program, and we tested it. I had clients test it, and then